everybody, it's Malachi Dawson and welcome to episode 1 of Genz on the Narrow Road. Oh my goodness, this is literally a dream come true. The Lord has given me so many incredible visions for this podcast and I just cannot wait to get started. Like, I am just so excited and filled with joy for what God is going to do. So I want to talk about, first of all, a little bit of the backstory of why we're starting this podcast and then also a little bit of my testimony. My verse for this podcast comes out of Matthew chapter 7 in verse 13. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few will find it. For me, this verse became real whenever I was a senior in high school and I had lost all of my friends because I started to pursue Jesus wholeheartedly. I remember sitting in my closet and having this moment where I felt like I really just stepped away from everything and began to pursue the Lord fully. I've never felt so lonely, but yet so fulfilled in my entire life. Something I wish I could go back and tell myself back then was that you are not alone. Like, even though you feel like you're the only teenager that is pursuing the Lord, I promise you, you will meet so many incredible people that are also pursuing the Lord and you're going to find them. But right now, the Lord is going to just grow you in private. And then once you start showing up in public, then the Lord is going to bring you to all of the right people. So I really had this heart to start talking about my generation, teenagers, that they're walking the narrow road. This isn't something that just happens to you whenever you're 30 years old and life gets more serious. It's something that you can start doing now. I was grown and raised in the church. Like, literally, my parents have always been pastors. They've been traveling evangelists, apostles, and prophets. So I've just been traveling in the fire of God my entire life. Watched every VeggieTales like I was a pastor's kid through and through. So growing up, I was always raised in the church. Even whenever I was 7 years old, I knew I was called to ministry from a very young age because I had that word prophesied over me from such a young age that I would be doing ministry, I would be speaking my whole life and things like that. So whenever I was 7 years old, I preached my first message.
Hi, I'm Malachi. My name is God's Messenger. I'm Pastor Joe and Autumn's little girl, and I'm a new preacher.
And that really was a huge moment for me because even the videos I have of that moment was I was already walking in something that God had called me to. So growing up, I began to preach in different churches that my dad was traveling to whenever I was younger. And I loved doing it. I was a little bit more shy whenever I was younger, but I just always loved ministry and I loved speaking and I also loved the Bible. And one thing I'm really grateful for is that my parents were so big, and they still are to this day. They were big on prayer. And so I even remember as a kid going to prayer meetings. I have several pictures of me sitting at prayer meetings, and that was what my life was built on. And so I truly just have to thank my parents that because of the lifestyle that they raised me in, that is why I'm here today, is because I was raised in love with Jesus. That's how my life went. So I'm so thankful for that. But I can't say that there haven't been a couple of hard seasons in my life. So whenever I was a sophomore and junior in high school, there was this time where I began to just kind of fall out, and I just was looking for fulfillment. I never struggled with drinking or smoking or anything like that. The Lord truly kept me and hid me from those things. But one thing I did struggle with was I felt really empty, and I began to fall into people pleasing. I began to look for fulfillment in things, in people's validation that weren't God. And because of that, I went through a hard season where I was really emotional. I felt down all the time. I felt like I was in a really dark place and I was really empty. And so I remember I started to have a lot of friends at the beginning of my junior year. I had a boyfriend, I had a bunch of friends, and I began to really just flow into this personality that the Lord had given me. The Lord has always blessed me with me being able to walk into a room and be very bubbly, and I've never met a stranger. I love talking to people. I always had that within me. So I began to kind of flow into that type of personality, and I began to be pretty well liked throughout my town, throughout my school, things like that. But there came a moment where the Lord started to slowly draw me back. And so I began to start reading my Bible unprompted. No one told me to. And I began to just start seeking the Lord more. So the summer of my senior year, before I was going into my senior year, I went to the college that I go to now, and I go there online. But I went there for a conference, and I had this radical encounter with the Lord. I laid on the floor and sobbed for 3 hours. I just was completely wrecked by God. And so in this time, I had God like literally reveal himself to me. Like I sat in the throne room and like I sat at God's feet, and I just felt the love of Jesus just like wash over me. As I was having this encounter with the Lord, he told me, I've been waiting for this moment your entire life. It was the moment that everything I had been reading in the Bible all growing up, every sermon I'd ever heard, every encounter I've ever had, it all became real to me as I sat and met God fully for one of the first times in my life. After I had this encounter, the Lord gave me an idea and an opportunity for me to step into to start a ministry in my hometown called The Move. So I was so excited. Literally, I had this exact journal. This is proof of Mally's history with God. I started this journal that night, and I wrote down every encounter that I had since then. And so I was writing all this down. Like I had this awesome idea. Like I was gonna go home and I was gonna start a ministry and start my, like get my whole town on fire for God. And so I came home absolutely burning on fire for Jesus and ready to spread the word of God. So I get home and I go and I start talking to all my best friends that I had before this. I started talking to my boyfriend, all of these things, and no one agreed with me. Everyone thought it was kind of weird, and a lot of people just began to take a big step back away from me. So a couple of months later, I want to say about 2 months from that moment where I like came home like completely on fire, I had lost every single one of my friends, all of them. I lost my boyfriend too. So I was basically alone, and all I had at that time was my family. So there was this moment that I lost all of that. Like I felt like I literally stepped out of my old life and I stepped into a completely new life. At the time, I didn't understand all this. I was just kind of like, okay, whatever the Lord says, you know, I was just going with it. But there was this moment that changed everything for me. So during the time of all of this, it was in the middle of the summer, and I was okay with being alone because I wasn't in school or anything like that. So I was just really pursuing the Lord, and literally all I was doing every single day was listening to sermons, worshiping, filming YouTube videos, and then getting to know God more by reading his word. I literally just went all in and read my Bible like all the time. It was an incredible time, but there was this moment where school was about to start, and it was my senior year. And if you're like me, like I had always heard about your senior year is your best year of high school. Like I was so excited. Okay, well, I'm going into my senior year a completely different person than I was my junior year. And I was like, everyone's just gonna be like kind of shocked because I was completely different at this point. And I remember I got kind of worried because we had an event to like it was a senior dinner, like preparing for our senior year. So we kind of like all, for the first time, everyone got back together and like everyone's talking. And I remember feeling really, really left out because I'd been hidden in my prayer room in my church like all summer. Like I'd just been investing in my time with the Lord, and everything about me was different. Whenever people would approach me, like I was just completely different. The way I talked, the way I walked, everything about me, God had completely renewed and changed. And so a lot of people just were kind of drawn back away from me at that time. And so I remember coming home and just going to my closet, and I just sitting there before the Lord and just being like, I thought whenever I gave everything up for you that I would have like a really joyful life and I would have all this fruit behind there. I mean, I honestly was just being so vulnerable with the Lord. It was like, I just kind of expected a lot more than this. And I remember just feeling alone and feeling that weight of being alone kind of come over me. And in my closet sitting there, I felt Jesus step into the room. Now, I hadn't had an encounter like I had that at the beginning of summer until this moment. And I felt Jesus come and sit next to me and wrap his arms around me and say, I want to walk with you in your high school. And that was the moment that changed everything for me, because I knew that I was not going to ever walk alone. I was walking with God. And so there were a lot of challenges my senior year. Like going into it, there was a lot more than I honestly thought. There was a lot of backlash, but there was also a lot of good things. There was a lot of salvations. There was a lot of healings. There were so many incredible testimonies. But there was also a trying season where I had to walk through some hard things. And a verse for me was, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. And I really just had to walk that out with the Lord, because it was a hard season. I'm not gonna lie, my whole senior year was pretty hard, but I knew that God was walking with me. And I'm telling you, that changed my life, because as I was walking through those hallways, I began to see things spiritually. I began to see darkness overtake certain people. I began to see like heavy depression on people. And I felt the desire to go up and talk to those people. I remember like even like during like lunch, like I would see someone that I knew was struggling, and I would follow them to the bathroom and I would say, hey, can I pray for you? And I just remember like being that light in that dark place. But I can't say that it wasn't hard, because it was. But I do want to read you a verse that really encouraged me. It's in Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 through 25. It says, then Jesus said to his disciples, if you truly want to follow me, you should completely reject and disown your own life, and you must be willing to share my cross and experience it as your own, as you continually surrender to my ways. For if you choose self-sacrifice and lose your life for my glory, you will continually discover true life. That verse changed everything for me, because as I read that, I was like, I'm gonna be a real follower of God, and I will give up whatever it takes to follow and pursue after him. And that's exactly what I did. I could share with y'all story after story about all the good and the bad, all the moments where I cried, but I also laughed. And there was just so many incredible moments. But in short, that's my testimony, that I went all in for God, and to this day, I still am going all in for God. And I will say that I was very alone my senior year. Like, I felt that aloneness, but God kept on bringing me the right people. And I can say now, that was almost 2 years ago, now I have some incredible people that have come alongside me. The Lord has just shown so much faithfulness towards me as I was showing my faithfulness towards him. And every single time I said yes to God, even though it was hard. He rewarded me, and it was so fulfilling. Living my life for Jesus was the greatest decision I ever made. There was so much joy behind that. And now I can say I'm truly walking in my purpose. I'm completely fulfilled by the joy of the Lord. And I'm just honestly so grateful. And so with that being said, I want to leave y'all with this last verse. It's John chapter 12, verses 25. The person who loves their life and pampers himself will miss the meaning of life. But the one who detaches his life from the world and abandons himself to me will find true life and enjoy it forever. If you want to be my disciple, follow me and you will go where I'm going. That verse was a turning point for me. As I read that, I said, God, I'll give up anything if it means that I can have more of you. And because I chose to give up so much, I gained so much with the Lord. And that is the greatest thing you can do, is die to the things of this world and become alive in what God has for you. I hope this video encouraged you, and I'm so excited to have a bunch of incredible people coming onto this podcast, sharing their testimony and sharing the hope of Jesus. I'm so excited, and I'll see you guys for episode 2 next week.